Hello, everyone. My name is Tobias Schremer from Marketing Prof, and I'll be your moderator in collecting your questions throughout the presentation. Our three experts will answer some of the questions during the presentation itself, and then we'll take the rest at the end. So please, if you have a question, type it into that Q&A box you see on the left-hand side of your screen, and we'll definitely try to get it in. Also, if you want to tell your Twitter followers about this event, please add the hashtag MKTGathlete to your tweets during or after the broadcast. And before we get started, I'd like to thank Optify for sponsoring today's seminar. Optify provides indispensable demand gen solutions for sophisticated B2B marketers. They help you generate more high-quality inbound leads, nurture more demand from your existing leads, and track the impact of all your marketing programs in one place. The Optify inbound marketing software suite brings together enterprise-class SEO, social marketing, email marketing, sales enablement, and website analytics into one integrated closed-loop solution. Now, today's seminar is entitled Hail to the B2B Marketing Athlete, and our three experts are Uri Bar-Joseph, Ariella Robison, and Jeanette Mifsud. Uri heads up Optify's lead generation efforts and can best be described as a marketing decathlete. He exemplifies what it is to be a marketing athlete and pushes tools and programs to their limits to achieve outstanding results. Ariella is Varioli's Web and Community Marketing Manager, and she's the epitome of a marketing athlete. With over 10 years of experience in online marketing, she manages all things digital for Varioli and wears multiple hats in order to achieve her aggressive marketing goals. Prior to Varioli, she worked for Intelligent Results, Attachmate, and Getty Images. And Jeanette is a B2B marketing veteran with over 18 years of experience in helping technology companies grow their business. Jeanette specializes in lead generation and content development, and currently is helping Optify in both of those areas. She has Fortune 500 and startup experience gained both in the U.S. and in Europe. So we're really excited to have Uri, Ariella, and Jeanette here to present today. So let's go ahead and get started. Jeanette, please take it away.
Thanks very much, Tobias, for the nice introduction, and welcome to everyone. We're really excited to share the results of our Marketing Athlete Survey with you. We conducted this survey last month, and maybe some of you that are on the phone actually contributed. So without further ado, let's get in and actually look at the results. So first of all, we're going to look at who the marketing athletes are, and what we found was actually not that surprising given our assumptions. We found that most of the athletes are over 30. 70% of them, in fact, were over 30. And it was a perfect bell curve distribution, as you can see, 11% on each age of that age distribution curve. I have to say that I am, you could probably tell from the gray hair, on the right-hand side of that curve, being such a seasoned marketer that I am. And the two other people on the panel today, Uri and Ariella, are on the big column there in their 30s. So we have some nice representation on age on the panel here. And some other things that we found that were interesting was that the 30-plus crowd, not surprisingly, are seasoned marketers. 83% of them said they had 5+ years in a marketing role. They were pretty confident in their skills across the board. The under 30s, well, they were a little less confident in offline marketing tactics and PR. And if you think about it, that sort of makes sense, because those things kind of come with age, and especially the offline tactics. Some of those younger athletes may really have very little experience in that area. How do you, Ariella and Uri, feel about that? Would kind of you agree with those findings?
Absolutely, and that makes sense to me. Definitely that under 30, that's those social media, they've known it their entire lives, basically, so they've, and their entire marketing lives anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, the gender was a pretty even split, so we weren't surprised with those results. So the next thing we looked at and asked people was how many years do you have on the job? And when we looked at the general population, over 65% have over 5 years experience. There weren't very many newbies. They made up a really small percentage that were less than 1 year. And we kind of looked also, there was a question that you'll see further on in the survey about the knowledge gap between, the people that had 5 years experience and less than 5 years experience. And the areas that really stood out were pay-per-click, email marketing, PR, and offline tactics. So that kind of went hand in hand with the results we saw with the age, too. Okay. This was pretty interesting. I had assumed when we were going into this that, way more athletes were individual contributors. But it turned out that 57% of the athletes actually managed at least one full-time employee, and only 43% were individual contributors. Another interesting fact that came out was that, the more experienced you are, the more people you manage. And that held true whether it was full-time employees or contractors. And we'll talk a little bit more about contractors later. Ariella, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. For myself, I don't manage any FTEs, just contractors, and I think what I see is this just indicates that you've got some really good experienced folks taking your survey, which is impressive to me that they have the time to do it.
Were you surprised by this result?
Not really. I think a lot of the marketing athletes feel that they want to keep doing things on their own, and kind of adding a management time to their plate is another task that they need to manage, where they already have so much to do anyway. So managing people on one hand takes off some of the activities off their plate, but on the other hand, it actually adds stuff, management time to your plate anyway. So contractors make sense a little bit, FTEs less.
Yeah, I mean, I've always tried to stay away from being a personnel manager because I like to get things done. I'm kind of a bit of a control freak, I have to say, and I think that as we'll see, the results came through loud and clear that these people are doers. They love to get on and do things and be involved in lots of different activities. So, I think even the people that do manage are very hands-on and still run programs themselves. And I think we'll see that in the evidence too. Hey, I wanted to share with you some of these great taglines. We asked the athletes to kind of sum up how they would describe themselves in a tagline, and we got some pretty creative people. And I have to say that Octomom is actually here in the room with me. That was a great tagline. But these people are feeling pretty good about themselves. These are all pretty positive. We enjoyed reading these, and this is just a selection of the taglines. And we'll be sending everyone that attended the webinar the full survey report with these and lots of other details included. What are your favorites, you guys?
I quite like the marketing chicken with his head cut off.com. Really,
I like the doer of all things with an acronym.
Yeah. I wonder if they've registered that .com.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along. So the next thing we looked at were, what resources did the athletes use to get their job done? And we kind of touched a little on the contractors. But what we did find was that, more marketing athletes manage contractors than full-time employees. And out of those that do manage contractors, the majority, manage small numbers between 1 and 5. And I think, Ariella, does that kind of, jive with what you do in your role?
Definitely, yeah. I generally manage between 2 and 3 outside contractors, depending on what's going on, what our workload is like. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And Uri, anything to add on that?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think it makes makes sense to manage contractors versus FTEs, but I can see how a lot of the marketing athletes do work in really small teams, and they have a lot on their plate, as we're going to see in the other in the next few slides. So adding FTEs actually adds a little bit of work to their plate. So I think most of them would rather have contractors versus FTEs. Yeah.
What was a little bit surprising was actually how much athletes do in-house, and it, in some ways it contradicted a little bit of what we just heard about the resources they use. What we found when we asked this question is, how much do you keep in-house and how much do you outsource to either contractors or agencies in these kind of lead gen areas? And it seemed like the majority, all apart from web design and maintenance, kept things in-house. And we kind of had some thoughts on maybe why the results kind of skewed that way. Ori, do you want to kind of talk about that?
Yeah, I think what we see here is that really labor-intensive and tasks that perceived as really high on expertise, require a lot of expertise, are more likely to be outsourced, like the web design, PR, even SEO, whereas the tasks that feel like more of a core competency of a marketing athlete or any marketer tend to stay in-house. I also think that a lot of, with this question, I think that some of the marketers, when they say keep in-house, putting that work on contractors still feel like they're keeping it in-house because they actually manage it. They manage the contractor, so that feels like it's still in-house. Where outsourcing the entire task to an agency, for example, that feels like more like outsourcing. And we can see that with PR, obviously, and web design, and even SEO. I think the reason why SEO is there is because it's becoming more and more perceived like a very expertise-heavy task.
Yeah, and Ariella, what do you keep in-house?
We keep in-house pretty much everything other than web design in terms of if we're doing a big redesign like we did in Q2 of this year. We use an agency for that, and we also use a PR agency. But that relationship is quite lockstep, and our PR person is actually on site with us a couple days a week, so she's very much feels like part of the team, sort of to Uri's point. And I would say an observation from the site is very interesting that social media is kept in-house so often, and to me that it just speaks to kind of the fact that social media could be perceived as perhaps a little risky to outsource, and it's also a really fun thing to do, so maybe that's why, people want to keep it close, and like we were saying, it's something that requires a lot of time and energy.
Yeah, and also we'll see, social media is bubbled up to the top as a really important tactic, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the age of the athletes too. I think this is the generation of social media. So that doesn't surprise me. Okay. Another thing we found is the majority work in small marketing teams, and that the results closely correlated between marketing team size and company size. So when we split the respondents into small, mid, and enterprise, you can see a very strong correlation between marketing teams. We feel like today, especially with kind of headcount squeeze, that people are after to do more with smaller teams. So you're not seeing huge marketing teams. Even in large enterprise organizations, everyone's trying to be leaner. And I think, we'd attest to that here. And Ariella, I believe, too, you work in a pretty small team.
We are a small team, yeah. We're sort of, I would describe us as in between those two categories that you have up there. We're not enterprise and we're not small, so we are around 300 and about 8 marketing people. So it's, it's definitely, it's challenging to get everything done.
Yeah. Uri, what have you seen kind of talking to, Optify customers? Are these, was this surprising to you on how small the teams were?
No. And I think marketing is traditionally a very leveraged team. You have a really small team, but usually is expected to generate a lot of results. It's kind of the engine of most B2B companies. Really small team, but you need to fuel the entire company's growth.
Yeah.
That's the reason for a lot of the challenges that we're going to see in the next few slides.
Yeah. Athletes like to use a lot of tools to get the job done. We asked them to tell us how many tools they used in these different areas. And, the findings were quite interesting. What really kind of stuck out to me when I first looked at this was that social media is the category where they reported, most athletes reported using more than one tool. And that was followed by web analytics and SEO. And the social media results didn't surprise me much at all, given that it's a new area. There's a lack of consolidation with the tools. And web analytics wasn't surprising either. I think everyone's using Google Analytics, and a lot of people are using another package on top of that. SEO stood out as the leading category where no tools were being used. What was your take on that?
I think, first of all, I was a little surprised, not by the fact that they use a lot of tools, but later on the fact that they don't care about using so many tools. And I think social media, in a lot of senses, every single channel is also being perceived as a tool. So Twitter is a tool, and Facebook is a tool, and LinkedIn is a tool. That's why we're seeing a lot of tools on social media. But that's very similar to my daily life here at Optify. Having like 8 tabs open on my browser at least.
I always have to apologize to my IT department whenever I get a new machine. I'm really sorry about all the number of things you have to install for me. Burdensome.
Yeah, I was wondering on the SEO results specifically whether some of the less, experienced marketers didn't know that SEO tools existed. That's why they didn't use them, because as you become more experienced and as you start to get into SEO, you know that tools are invaluable and you really can't do a good job without them. So I wonder, if that's specifically what gave us that result. The last observation was that 3% are not using an email tool. Well, no surprise there. You don't want to be sending bulk emails from your Outlook account. That's not good. So what you'll see throughout this presentation is, we started to kind of divide the respondents into a couple of segments and look at how those segments, if those segments made a difference to the results. And we put them into 2 segments depending on how they answered the question, how would you rate yourself in meeting your lead gen goals? And we grouped star performers are the people that we said, we're right on target. We're just exceeding goals, or we're blowing away our numbers. Those are our star performers, and they made up about 47% of the audience. The less successful, those people were sometimes meeting their goals, or they were missing their goals. These are not, people that are totally, never winning. They were just, we said they're a little less successful, and they made up 53% of the audience. And as you'll see as we go through some of the presentation, we looked at how these people are, how the different segments answered the questions and what differences showed up. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is how the marketing athletes spend their time. And because these are marketing athletes and these are doers, we weren't surprised, and we were pleased to see that the bulk of them spent more of their time, that's 15 plus hours, in the area of marketing execution. That was really great to see. I would have been kind of disappointed if I hadn't seen those results. So the next area where they spent, most of their time was in marketing operations, with about 14% reporting that they spent 15 plus hours in that area. Now, I know my two athletes here around the table are, would agree with those, right? You guys are executing day in, day out, right?
Exactly right, yeah.
Yep.
Makes sense.
So what did we find out about the star performers? Well, one really interesting observation when we looked at the two segments were, a big gap, appeared in the amount of time spent in two key areas, marketing planning and marketing execution. The star performers were spending more of their time in those areas and much less time in non-productive areas like admin. So, it seems to pay to plan and then execute, and then, make sure you're using your time in really productive things that directly lead to revenue. Do you guys agree with that?
Definitely. One observation I just had is I think that the operations and the planning are quite linked in my mind, because I think a lot of one thing you had in operations was reporting and sort of studying the results of your previous efforts and deciding what to do next based on those results. So just saw a nice kind of intersection there.
Yeah, I love this slide because I think it tells a lot of the story about marketers and specifically successful marketers, how planning wisely affect your results and has a huge impact on your entire operation, not just the execution, but the entire thing. And I also like the correlation between what we call the star performers and the less successful group, and seeing that difference. The other thing that I noted here is the difference in other and admin, and it's the exact opposite. I think the less successful marketers have more, I don't know if it's more on their plate in terms of admin work and other tasks, but they seem to be pulled aside by those type of tasks instead of focusing only on things that are directly related to the bottom line, which for most of us B2B marketers are either qualified leads or opportunities. And I know,
can circle back to planning if you haven't made a good plan and know what how you're relating back to your specific goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we, at least here at Optify, we invest a lot of time in planning, even on a weekly basis. But the time that we invest in planning helps us with the execution on a daily basis, because then we have a good baseline to check our performance every day, and then we know how to make adjustments to the plan. So the time that we put in planning, even if it's a lot of time sometimes, really pays off in the long run.
Yeah, and I think that's something that comes with maturity. As you get more experience in marketing, you realize how important that is. So we're looking at time spent here, and this is back to the general audience. And the first question we asked on time spent were on some kind of really broad areas of how they slice their time, and now we're getting a little more detailed. And we asked them, these are more specific areas. How do you use time, slice between things like lead gen and lead nurturing, content, etc. And by far the people more people were spending much more time on content than any other area. And I guess this is not surprising, right? The world has changed for B2B marketers. Content is king, and it governs everything we do. It's used in all different, types of campaigns. It's kind of like the core. So you can see there from the results that content was the #1 area where more people spent most time, followed by lead gen and website management. 1/3 are spending no time on lead nurturing at all, according to our results, and we think that may be a little bit to do with, the definition of lead nurturing. Sorry, I know you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, first of all, the investment in content makes complete sense to me, especially since content takes time, too. So people, first of all, invest a lot of time in creating and managing content because it's so important to every lead generation program that you're running, but also because it takes a lot of time. But that's also the reason why some marketers shy away from content because it's such an investment and it takes so long to produce a really good content piece. For example, this survey, which is basically a content offer, took us a lot of time to put together, to execute, to write the PDF, to write the webinar. I mean, this whole content work around it takes the majority of our time, but it's the core of our lead generation programs, and it's such an important element of everything that we do.
We've also found that surveys are just a great lead gen tactic. Super, if you can pull it off, just really great response.
Right.
Yeah, people are really curious about what everyone else is doing. Yeah.
I would agree with the definition of lead nurturing. I think lead nurturing is becoming a synonym for email drip automation, and I understand why people kind of stay away from it, because lead nurturing can be really hard to set up and maintain. It takes a lot of time, and the biggest problem, in my opinion, with lead nurturing sometimes is the inability to directly measure it and attribute results to lead nurturing. So with lead generation programs, you can directly attribute the results to the bottom line, to opportunities, and even to revenue. With lead nurturing, because of attribution, sometimes you can't really say, you know, I sent 5 emails to this group, you know, 50% of them touched that, and that attributed X amount of dollar to my revenue. It's really hard to say, so it's really hard to justify the time investment. That's kind of my take about lead nurturing.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that people think lead nurturing equals marketing automation, and I believe if you look at lead nurturing, meaning everything you do to touch a lead, whether it's the sales guy picking up the phone, sending a follow-up email, then everyone does lead nurturing, right? You can't not do lead nurturing in some form. So I think that's why the results are a little bit skewed there.
And I think as people build up more of that critical mass of content that they're spending so much time on, then they can do effective lead nurturing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, you know, putting the star performer lens on those areas, what we noticed, what really stood out, is that the star performers focus larger blocks of their time compared to their less successful peers. And that happened across the board. Where it was really apparent, where it really stood out, was in lead generation and content. And obviously those are two, critical areas for B2B marketers today. So that was a very interesting finding. Ariella, did you have any?
Just thinking about in marketing organizations who feels that they're directly responsible for lead gen versus sort of indirectly, and I think that the PR people and perhaps the person that works on the website doesn't necessarily feel like they're contributing directly to lead gen, that it's more of a very top of the funnel, kind of awareness activity.
Yeah. At the end of the day, as marketers, as B2B marketers, we're responsible to delivering high-quality leads to our sales team. I think that kind of summarizes the work of the B2B marketer, or most B2B marketers, if they're not specialists in any specific area. So it makes complete sense that the people who say that they hit their numbers consistently will say that they invest most of the time in lead generation and in content, because content, again, is the base for most of your lead generation programs. If you invest your time in other stuff, it means that you are, I don't want to say not doing your job, but probably trading off some of this bottom line results for something else. And if you cannot attribute that to the bottom line, you have some problems.
Yeah. So the takeaway here is be focused, and be focused on things that matter. And we'll see in some of the comments that focus was a big problem for some people. I think that was the chicken with the heads cut off.com person. I mean, there's a lot going on, and you need to focus to get anything achieved. So next we looked at things that are really near and dear to our heart at Optify, and specifically questions around lead generation. And what we found when we asked athletes to tell us how they spent their time with specific lead gen channels is that social media was the most popular tactic. More marketers spending the majority of their time on social media than any other tactic. And it was also the lowest percentage of people said they were spending no time in the social media area. And in correlation to that, or opposite to that, I guess, in contrast, is that PPC was the least popular tactic. 57% said they're spending no time at all on PPC. How does that kind of jive with your guys' experience?
I think that also aligns with outsourcing of PPC a little bit. I think a lot of marketers either outsource this or completely stop doing it. I know at Optify, at least, we stopped doing PPC. And when I say PPC, I mean mainly AdWords. We do other pay-per-clicks, but not on AdWords, because it takes so much time and it's so expensive. And when at the end of the day, when you run the analysis, it's hardly ever ROI positive, unless you have a full-time person on it that really plays with all the small dials in that AdWords machine, and they tend to raise the prices, raise your costs as you get more successful. Yeah. Unfortunately, so I really understand why PPC is kind of getting out of the picture, at least from an in-house perspective. You might outsource it if you have a really good agency who can do that for you. But if you need to do it in-house and you have so many other things on your plate, it doesn't really make sense to invest your time in PPC.
Yeah, and I think that the shift is definitely underway to focusing more time and energy on SEO. It's just kind of turning down the dial on PPC and turning it up on SEO. That's certainly how we've approached it, and all the stuff that feeds into that, social and content, definitely feed into SEO. So it's just a much kind of better use of your time. And PPC can, in some ways, just be set up to just run, and it doesn't require a lot of daily attention. If you do it properly, you can kind of just set it and forget it a little bit. You shouldn't do that too much, but there's a certain element of that.
I like the analogy of real estate with PPC and SEO. With PPC, it's like you're renting a place. As long as you pay, you have where to live, but it's not yours.
Right.
And with SEO, it's like building a house. It's going to take you longer. It's going to be harder probably, but once you're done building it, it's yours, and you can live there. The only thing you need to care about is maintenance.
Yep.
And I think more people are now wanting to own their own house.
Yeah. So when we looked at, how star performers spend their time in specific lead generation tactics, that pattern of focus came out again. So star performers are focusing larger blocks of time in all areas, actually, except for pay-per-click. No surprise there. It's kind of seeming like it's fallen out of favor with B2B marketers. And my experience with PPC is, unless you're selling something that has a high price tag, it's really hard to make the ROI work. And I think that, along with the expertise it takes to really do it well, is contributing to what we're seeing here. When we looked at the biggest focus gap between star performers and less successful, it was in offline tactics, which was interesting. So, star performers are focusing more of their time on some offline tactics than the less successful, and that kind of correlates with what we found with age and experience too. That the more, the star performers tend to be more experienced, they're a bit older, and they have the expertise in some of the offline tactics.
I want to mention maybe a question that was asked earlier with regards to tools. One of the participants said that maybe the fact that respondents indicated that they are not using SEO tools can be attributed fact that a lot of companies are now outsourcing SEO. I think there could be some correlation there. Very similar to PPC as well, or any other tactics. They use less tools because they give someone else the responsibility of managing that entire area.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see some more data about SEO coming up here. So next we asked about how people felt about their knowledge about specific lead gen tactics. And we asked them, indicate your level of knowledge. Do you have little knowledge or no knowledge, sufficient or expert knowledge, or do you not do this at all? And as a bunch, these guys are pretty confident. They felt pretty good about, their knowledge of all, across the board, the lead gen tactics. And again, this is like, we're seeing this persona come out of these kind of like confident doers, kind of type A people. So they felt pretty good about things for the most part. The areas where they felt they had the greatest expertise were social media, offline tactics, and email marketing and SEO, both tied at 28%. The weakest areas were, there goes PPC again, online advertising, and surprisingly SEO. You think there's a little bit of a disconnect there, but I think the people that feel good about SEO feel good, and then the people that don't. They're polarized. Exactly right. Yeah, but overall, people are feeling, pretty good about their knowledge.
Yeah, I was surprised not to see PR there on the weak areas, especially since we know that a lot of companies do outsource PR, but maybe that's why they don't feel like they don't know enough, because they have an expert that does that for them. Yeah, I think there is a big connection between how a tactic perceived as expertise has you or not, and the likelihood of that tactic to be outsourced.
Yeah.
We can see that with PPC. We can even see that with SEO. People tend to maybe use contractors and use subject matter experts on SEO because it's being perceived as a very expertise-heavy tactic. It requires a lot of knowledge, and not all marketers, especially marketing athletes that need to kind of know a little bit about everything, can really master.
Yeah, there's so much blue on this chart of people who are just saying, yeah, I know enough to get by, and I think that speaks to just having to be so well-rounded to just know a little bit of everything when you're in B2B and on a smaller team. So, and I think when people leave the company, then a lot of people have to sort of take on that responsibility, absorb it. It can't just go away. So you just have to be adaptable.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so then we put the star performer lens on that question, and to see how the star performers felt about their expertise. And of course, it wasn't a surprise that they felt that they had greater expertise than their less successful peers, kind of across the board. These are the chess beaters. These are the go-getters. They're blowing away their numbers. They're feeling really good about their expertise. And the biggest expertise gaps showed up between PPC, email marketing, and offline tactics. That kind of, correlates to the other things we've seen in those areas.
I'm a little bit surprised by the email marketing number, but I think it is maybe a little bit going back to you had a distinction between, doing your own emails and then renting lists and how to go about that. But that's maybe a little bit more the gap for people.
Okay, moving on. Next we asked them to rate, how they felt about their lead gen effectiveness, and we gave them a bunch of statements and asked them whether they agreed or disagreed or kind of felt ambivalent. And these guys, they felt productive, and what we can takeaway was they felt productive, and they loved to juggle multiple channels. 82% of them felt like they were spending their time on important activities, areas that were directly affecting the business. It was great to see. Admin was the only area where they felt like they were spending a little too much time. They prefer to be spending, less time on admin. And, 62% of the people said, yeah, I like working on multiple channels. So, these are great multitaskers that feel, I think they'd be bored if they only had a couple of channels to deal with. And we kind of approached that question, we'll see later on, and that response came back again that, we like multiple channels, bring it on, we'll master them.
When I looked at the results originally of the survey, I also smiled like I'm smiling right now, because it kind of tells me, I'm not the only one, because I was thinking things about myself, and then got some confirmation from other people, from all the respondents, to the same stuff. I mean, the persona of the marketing athlete is kind of uncovered here with, it's really a type A person who's really confident, but like to do a lot of things, but still feel very valuable, and that he or she does things that directly related to the bottom line. I know I like doing that. I know that if I'm being pulled off to things that are not directly affect my bottom line, I get a little angry.
Yeah, you get antsy. It's like, come on, I got to get back to my lead gen work, and enough of this admin stuff. So
I'm all pretty excited that it's September and things are really starting.
Yeah, no one's on vacation anymore. Yeah, we can get stuff done. I agree. So next we asked them, okay, so you must have some challenges. What are your biggest challenges? And it was no surprise that budget was the leading challenge, followed closely by time. Those were the most common challenges that people cited. What was really interesting, though, is, 71% felt their goals were realistic. That surprised me a bit. I thought there may be some kind of whining about, I can't meet my goals, they're not realistic. And that led me to believe, these people must be really involved with goal setting, right? They're bought into their goals, therefore they think they're realistic. Back to that multitasking thing, only 27% felt they had too many lead gen channels and tools to manage. Yeah, so no surprise there with budget and time. You guys have any thoughts on that?
I can always have more money.
More time. Yeah. Okay, so the star performers, what did they think of those questions? Well, again, no surprise. These guys felt like they had less challenges across the board. They're real go-getters. The most noticeable gap was for the statement, my goals are unrealistic. They were like, no. I'm in with this goal thing. I agree with them. I'm just going to go make them happen, and they do. These are, in the words of the star performers, their biggest challenges. Some quite funny ones here. Keeping all the plates spinning. Time. Is that staying focused is a big one. Any ones that jump out to you guys as particularly interesting or that you resonate with?
We had a previous discussion actually specifically about this. I feel like there's a kind of a trend in B2B marketing, because we're now responsible not just for lead generation but also for the quality of the leads, and in a lot of companies actually for opportunities. I know we are responsible for it here at Optify. We're kind of surprised not to see some of those challenges here mentioned, because I feel like some of the things that used to be on the sales side, like 5-10 years ago, are now moving more and more towards the marketing side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think so. Our group actually has an inside sales person in our team, so the follow-up on leads is is actually up to marketing and taking them all the way through to kind of what we say is stage 3, so they're actually interested in having a further discussion, setting an appointment. So the follow-up, is actually in marketing, and I think it helps, to have that all kind of up to an opportunity within the marketing organization pretty well.
Okay, so we're going to kind of summarize what we've learned about the marketing athlete, and then we'll look at, specifically the takeaways we learned about the star performers. So we learned that they're, majority are 30 plus in age, even gender split, and they're experienced for the most part, 5 years plus in marketing. They're very confident in their skills. They use a lot of tools to get the job done, and they're feeling good about their productivity. These are the doers. They love multitasking. They're great at juggling, lead gen channels, and time and budget are their biggest challenges. We also discovered that social media is a big area of focus, and that, showed up because of the time they spent, the expertise level they perceived they had, and, it correlated very well to the age of the athletes. These people were born into the social media age. Not born, but, you know what I mean? Their working life, they've been surrounded by social media. So some great learnings there. Now, what sets the star performers apart? And I think, these 4 things kind of bubble to the top when we summarize that. And, everyone, for the most part, had a great attitude, but we really saw that the star performers' positive attitude was very strong. These are believers. They're very confident in themselves and their skills, and what they're doing is right. They felt they had a very, high degree of expertise in the areas that mattered to them. They spent a lot of, more time planning and not just diving into, the latest and greatest tactic. They thought, they planned, and then they executed. And they focused on the things that matter. They focused on execution, on executing programs that were working, and spent a lot less time on things like admin and non-productive activities. They focused larger blocks of their time. So those are the things that we kind of found that set the star performers apart. We hope there's some things that you can learn from that, to apply to your business. Any comments from you guys on those?
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons why we did this study is to get to this, to say, okay, you're a marketing athlete. Are you hitting your goals? Are you meeting your goals consistently or not? And if you're not, what can you do better to hit your goals? And I think the main thing that came up from this is the big focus on planning. And I think planning you need a system or a process to have the right planning. You need to collect the data. You need to have a baseline. You need to have a method, a consistent method for planning and then executing. And I think that's the biggest thing that came to me from the results and comparing the star performers to the less successful ones. The emphasis on having a method to go about planning and then executing and making sure that you eliminate the noise around it. Focus only on that, and you're going to hit your goals. If you feel like, if you cannot justify an activity by saying this is directly attributes to my bottom line, you shouldn't be doing it. Or you should devote only, 5% of your time to it. But as a B2B marketer, especially marketing athlete, that you have so many things on your plate, you need to make sure that whatever you do has direct relationship to your bottom line. And I think a lot of it starts with the planning of your activities and then just go and execute.
Yeah. Anything to add, Ariella?
No, I think that covered it.
Okay, so we're going to spend a little time going through some of the questions that came in. Maybe, Uri, if you could read some of the questions, that would be great.
Yeah, and so we had one question about social media. I really believe in social media's positive effect for online marketing. However, I work in a large corporation, and they are really against it due to the negative comments feedback. and how can I convince them to go social? Good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's got to make sense for your business, right? And you've got to pick the right channels where your audience is going to be. It's easy to jump on all the, social media channels, but if your audience isn't there, don't do it. I mean, Ariella, where are you, seeing traction?
Definitely, I mean, I would consider just the baseline thing of having a blog on your website, and so it's like, obviously you do that, but it was actually a struggle for us to even get one of that, but we have one and have had great success with that. It's really building a community around kind of thought leadership and having opinions out there in the market. So that was kind of step one on the social continuum. And then, of course, you sort of maintain your presence on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And then we're really diving into LinkedIn because we feel like for B2B, that's just a great channel. It's so targeted. You can really pick your people down to the company. You can say, I want to just go after these, 35 companies, and they do that for you. So, I mean, just again, aligning the channel to your goals is the key there with social. But yeah, I mean, I think Twitter certainly also. I don't so much see, frankly, Facebook as being a great B2B social channel yet. But
I would just say that if you haven't noticed yet, I'm a data person. So I would say if you want to convince them, show them the data. Run a small experiment and just show them that social media contributes to the number of leads, number of opportunities, and to the revenue of your company. If you're going to show them that, no one will say no, because then you're comparing the potential effect of negative comments versus increasing your revenue. Any executive will take an increase in revenue over a few negative comments. So if you want to convince them, I would run a small experiment, show the data, and show how social media can really contribute to your bottom line.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, so did this a question about the survey, and it covered the marketer's expertise and time devoted to messaging and creating value proposition statements, clarifying messaging, and so on and so forth.
That's a great question, and it didn't, but we'll make sure we do that next time around because
probably people put that in the content bucket.
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. We didn't specifically ask expertise around that, but that's a great point.
People just have to create content whether they have expertise in it or not.
Yeah.
I think there's a follow-up question to Ariella's answer about LinkedIn. Are you using LinkedIn advertising as part of your social media strategy, or are you engaging with LinkedIn in different ways?
Yeah, so we are engaging with them in the advertising arena, but then we also consider it a social vehicle. So both for us.
Yeah, one question came in that why do you think that PPC isn't popular? And we covered this a little bit in the presentation, but my take is that it's hard to drive volume at the right price point for a lot of B2B organizations. Now that completely varies depending on the average selling price of whatever it is you're selling. Some organizations can make it work, but I've certainly worked with a lot of companies that it doesn't make sense. The cost per lead is so high because you get into super competitive areas, and then sometimes the volume's just not there. You guys got any reflections on that?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways PPC is a good way to just get awareness of your value prop out there, and I definitely consider it in some ways more of a branding and awareness activity versus a lead gen activity.
Yeah.
It's just good to have your name show up for various searches if you can't get there organically.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, when we looked at PPC, we measured it in terms of how the ROI was from PPC, and we found that, at least for us, and it depends on the company, on the the price point, on a lot of variables. But at least for us, it wasn't positive, and we ran PPC for a while. I would say that there's a high connection. There's a strong connection between PPC and SEO. As I mentioned before, I like the analogy of building versus renting. So while you're building, you still need to live somewhere, and PPC is a good way to find a house until you finish building your house. It also helps you know what works, what keywords work better in terms of their conversion. So you can use PPC.
It's a great SEO research tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you can know better about your keyword strategy using SEO as the proxy, using PPC, as the proxy.
Well, thank you. I think we're just about out of time. I'm going to hand back over to Tobias for some closing words. And just a reminder, we will be sending out the full survey report with lots of details to everyone that participated in the webinar. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you all. I really appreciate it, Uri, Ariella, and Jeanette, for those great insights today. We really hope everyone enjoyed the broadcast today, and as you heard, you will be getting a copy of the results from Optify of the survey. One last thing, please take a quick minute if you're still on to click our survey link and fill out that survey. It'll just take you a moment. This helps us a lot in modifying and improving our webinar program. So thanks again to everyone for joining us. We hope to see you again very soon. Have a great day.